Good evening, everybody. Welcome on in to the Cord Jamal Facebook page. Hope you all enjoyed our concert that we had for you for the last hour. Loads of great comments in already from people all around the world who've been enjoying the music and the tributes and the interview with Mike Quinn, who really stole the show in the last hour. So as you can see on screen, I'm joined by Brian Keating, Tom's great friend. And in the background, you can see the picture of the late TL with John Dooley and myself, that from a few years back. And indeed, Pat and Monica McWalter are there from Garfrons as well. How are you folks?
Hi, good.
Enjoying the night.
It was a lovely tribute, Pat, and loads of people were anxious to give their time. A lot of those musicians you'd remember from being here in Lally's over many, many years for many different reasons, be it just a session at the weekends or more often than not for one of the great nights that was organised to do with a sporting trophy or a great success or a special guest arriving into the village. And it was amazing how those nights gave such a lift, not just to Lally's, but to all of Garfrons, Pat.
Yeah, well, I suppose Garfrons is very much a village in the backwater. But certainly Tom put it on the map. He was our greatest ambassador, no matter where he went, you know. He was an Irish man, he was a Galway man, he was a Dromore man, but first of all, he was a Garfrons man. So, as I said before, if you didn't know where Garfrons was, when Tom was finished with you
definitely did. Yeah. Brian, when did you first come across Tom Lally?
Oh, yeah. Well, I probably met Pat before I met Tom Lally. I used to go out with the mobile libraries out to Pat when Pat was teaching in the school in Kilconnelly. But we used to stop in Garfrons as well. But Eileen used to come out to the mobile, and May Dooley. Oh, May is watching in tonight. How are you, May? And Eileen, loads of people from Garfrons. But the man himself, TL, I can't have any recollection of him except the first recollection is in the early 90s. Myself and Jerry Glennon and my brother Dave, we were going to a match in just Galway, May, obviously, like in Tuam Stadium. We were going down Shop Street, heading towards about Bishop Street, whichever, heading towards the stadium. And Tom joined our company, and he had a green and white Celtic scarf on him at the time, you know. And I says to him, I said, are you a Glasgow Celtic supporters? How do you mean Glasgow Celtic? He said, Celtic. He said, there's only one Celtic. Well, I said, excuse me now, I come from Westport. I said, and the Celtic over the road from us is over in Castlebar Celtic. And he was trumped a bit by it because normally Tom would pick you up, like if you said something that was, I said, you know, they're not the only Celtic in the world. And I think we hit it off because we had a confrontation in the very first meeting. And after that, it was plain sailing, you know. The marks were laid down like as to what the ground rules were. So that was my first encounter with Tom. So, Ollie, yeah.
We talked about yesterday, Pat, being the anniversary then. And again, you know, a couple of texts coming in, one from John Knightley there. He mentioned the word lonely. Which you yourself mentioned to us when we were chatting just beforehand. There really was that sense of loneliness around the village yesterday when, you know, the fact that it was the anniversary just brought a dark sense of reality that, you know, Tom wasn't going to appear anymore, even though there was almost a sense that every time you walk through the village, you're expecting still to see him.
Yeah, it was a very difficult year, and over COVID, and certainly it would have been a very difficult year for Tom, because Tom, he loved people, he loved interacting with people, and especially he loved bits of controversy. And I suppose apart from the Trump stuff, there was very little controversy, there was very little sporting controversy, and of course that's what Tom thrived on. And you know, especially I was talking to John Dooley in July and around kind of final time, and Tom had never missed a kind of final since 1961. And, you know, for ages before that, he'd be preparing his trip, regardless of who'd be in it. And, you know, it was strange in July, there was no kind of final and there was no Tom. But still, you know, you'd expect Tom to sneak around the corner as he would often do. And he'd either be looking for you to do a little job for him to check the heat or fix a lock on a door or something or else he'd have a bit of controversy, something to give out about. And if it was really good stuff, you'd see Tom coming running. Tom, when he was really excited, he put on a little bit of a souther, as they'd say.
Just while I'm talking to you, Pat, I'm looking at the other screen where we're watching. This is live on the Core Jamal Facebook page, and it's open to comments as well. So anybody there that wants to post a comment or a remembrance or their own little story of TL, feel free to do so. We'll be happy to read them out in the duration of this broadcast. We'll leave that there.
Just to add to what you're saying there, Ollie, we've also we're live on YouTube as well. YouTube Core Jamal channel. There are a lot of people out there that don't have Facebook, so if they go onto Core Jamal on YouTube, what they're seeing on Facebook now, they're seeing this. So it's a dual thing. It's 2 channels tonight: Facebook and YouTube. So just
and I can tell you as well, you're missing very little with Ireland against Luxembourg, which is why our viewership is at record levels here tonight. Pat, the last big night we had in Lally's was Liam McCarthy in 2017. I know you had your own role in the build-up to that night because it was panic stations.
Well, it certainly was, and as Mike said in his interview earlier, Tom, he was probably not the best in the world to plan, especially regarding buying drink and stuff. So it seems just time after dinner on that day, he realised on the prompting of Mike that he didn't have enough Guinness. So he came back and he said, "Have you a trailer?" I said, "I have." "Have you a hitch?" I said, "Yes, I have." He said, "Would you bring me as far as Ballindine?" And I said, "Why? Why do we need a trailer to go to Ballindine?" "Well, we could do we could be short with a barrel or 2. So he heads over to Jackie, his good friend Jackie Stevens, and we loaded 4 barrels of Guinness on the trailer. And then Jackie gave him a few vouchers, but we had to head for the supermarket. And when we got there, he said, "Come on, give me a hand, come in." And I says, "No, Tom, if I go in," I said, "somebody will swipe the Guinness." So I had to sit and shotgun on the trailer while Tom did his shopping. But it all worked out well. We had a great crowd, and he had enough Guinness, so it was great.
And I'd say the Guinness got a fair whack or 2 that night from the crowd that was in it.
Well, I think, and I think the way it ended up, Tom was so loaded on the night, I think he passed out that night with all the excitement, I think, at the end of it all.
It was fantastic, that's for sure.
Yeah, it was a great night.
I know that, Brian, you can put a post up on the Facebook page as well, just indicating that people can go to the YouTube channel as well. So we'll get people on any different platform that they want. So I suppose that was the last great night. And I know a little bit later on, we're going to be joined by Josie Hart as well. He's going to give us his thoughts on coming down from Gort with Aidan Hart, his son, who's on that Galway team and still is, but the 2017 All-Ireland winning team. And that night in the community centre, Pat, which was the build-up to being in Lally's then later on, that was, again, another famous night for the village.
Well, it was, again, for, we're a very small community, but we're very proud of it, so we have a really lovely community centre there, and, it's been used by car players, especially during the winter time. We often get up to 100 there at night time during the winter time, so it was a great occasion where all the local people could gather, and the children and that, and it was a wonderful night. Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah.
I suppose we'll hear in a moment from one man who graced us in Lally's with his presence more than one occasion, and that's the legendary Michael Commons, who we met last night in the build-up to tonight to record a piece with his thoughts as well. And there was an amazing relationship there. Of course, what a lot of people don't know as well, Pat, is like Tom would have been a regular contributor to local notes as well, wouldn't he, in local newspapers, be it in Mayo in particular. And he had a great draw for Michael, and he always, managed to find time to make his way to Lally's for all of these big nights as well.
Yeah, Michael was a great friend of Tom for many, many years, and he was very kind to him. He used to bring him to matches and get tickets for him. When no Galway person would get a ticket for him, Michael would often come up trumps. And I know, say, when we had a post office here, and Monica retired here a number of years ago, Tom organised that Michael Cummins would come to the village and he would do a recording for Midwest and all of that kind of thing. Tom, he was a very proud Garfun's man, and he wanted to make sure it reached as far as possible. But Michael Cummins and myself were really great friends, and Michael was always very kind and very generous with Tom, and very patient, I must say, as well.
Let's have a listen to Michael, Brian. We might fire off the first
we've
piece
got-
of this
yeah.
interview with Michael Commons from last night in Lally's.
Yes, Michael and yourself had a very good interview. We have it in two parts here at the moment, and
Remember Tom Lally on a night like this without remembering his good friend Michael Commons, who spent so many nights with us here in Lally's bar, reminiscing and being part of great celebrations and great debates as well. And I'm sure, Michael, there wasn't too many occasions where the milk can station wasn't referenced when we were introducing you.
Well, you're absolutely 100% right. Midwest to Tom was the milk can station, and no, you had to take the rub. You had to take it, and if you didn't, forget about it. Yeah, that was Tom Lally. You know, extraordinary. It's hard to believe the year has passed. I couldn't believe when you told me today that a year has slipped by already since we got the sad news of the passing of Tom, because like Tom was an icon to this village. Not just to Garifons, well, certainly to Garifons. If you heard the name mentioned anywhere, the first person you thought of was Tom Lally. And he was known probably much further afield than a lot of people from this area would have realised, especially in GA circles. Like, he was extraordinarily well known. He had friends down in Cork, he had them in Armagh, he had them in so many counties. And he was, as we were talking earlier on, a person we'd never see the likes of again. He was a total one-off.
As you say, well travelled. He could turn up at Celtic Park in Glasgow, he could turn up in Terryland Park, he could turn up at any county in Ireland for a GA match. What made him so special? Like, what was the thing about Tom Lally that just endeared him to so many people in so many different counties?
Well, Tom was, to put it, Tom was fairly blunt. No matter where you met him, you knew where you stood with him, and that's a good thing at many a time. I was in his company on a good few occasions. I remember we travelled to some of the matches down in down south in Thurles especially, and we went down to a few of them in the 90s, and two or three few in the car there. But I remember one particular one coming back, and we dropped into Francis Loughnell's pub in Thurles with Tipperary back a few years earlier in Roscrea actually. And there was quite a few there people in the bar that day, and sure, Tom was only in about 5 minutes. There was nearly a war in there, because he brought up something about an incident that happened when Galway played in the Munster Hurling Championship in the 60s, and some tip fella that had given a fair smash to a Galway book at the time. And straight away, he was nearly involved in a rumpus in the bar, but we quieted it down and they got talking again, you know. But wherever he went, there was something about him. There was something very, very special about Tom. And I think that was actually even highlighted there only two or 3 years ago, the day of the Galway Limerick hurling final, when out of the thousands coming out of Croke Park, Tom was the one who was on the 6 o'clock news. One of a handful of people, like. Why ever they zoomed in on Tom Lally, I don't know. There was something about him. I think that was the 2018 final. He was absolutely extraordinary. You talked about his love of sport. It wasn't just GA, like, he had a huge knowledge of so many sports. And what fascinated me, I think, above all of them, was shinty. I thought that was extraordinary. He was over to Fort William, or up that area in the Highlands, to some of the shinty finals, and made many friends up there. And that was Tom. He could appear anywhere. He was just an extraordinary person.
And perhaps one of the reasons why so many people would find Tom Lally so extraordinary was his knowledge. And like, he had his stats and the facts going back decades and decades, and you couldn't argue with them.
If you did, you'd probably be proved a loser, because Tom was the original Dr. Google. I mean, he had an amazing collection inside in the house in there, and many of the time now he'd give you stuff that he'd hardly lend to many, because he was a collector, but not only was he a collector, he had it in his head as well.
Okay, so
yeah, that's TL.
That's TL. The
TL's
first
last
part.
night.
Yeah. Just while we had looked at that, just want to thank Ollie's two daughters. I think it was Laura and
Emma.
And Emma. They did the video for that yesterday, which was excellent. Like, two girls there out with dad, and they did the video, and congrats to them for doing that. The next video, in between that now, we're just going to show one of the famous nights with Michael and Ollie was in 2013, I think it was, December 22nd, around that time. And this thing nearly broke all records on YouTube, like with the razor wit of Tom Lally. Like when the time came, like, and when the put down had to be put down, this is what Tom came up with. And you can have a look at it. Like, I'm sure most of you have seen it before, but it's worth having a look at again.
Yeah, so this was after Mayo had hammered Galway in the football.
Obscure Eastern Black Country winner.
Michael, great to have you here. Okay, we'll focus in on TL in a minute, but as we mentioned, we are in Garfron, so we're very much in maroon and white territory. And the closer it seems that you get to any border area in either part of either county, it seems the more intense the rivalry becomes.
Oh, there's no doubt whatsoever about that. I mean, go back to Drummer Queen and Bridge, how many times has that changed colours? They talk about South Armagh, I don't know. But Asher's part of the ball here, you know.
And yet there was a lot of Mayo people that even the way things went haywire and so one-sided in Pearse Stadium in 2013 that a lot of people didn't take any great satisfaction because there was no fight at all, it seemed, in the run of that.
Well, I mean, okay, I know Tom said that probably were at this year. But if that game had been played the following Sunday, you wouldn't have the same result. You might have the same result, but it wouldn't be. Mayo got 3 early goals and Galway had that. But I think Galway blew themselves as they went on, and in fairness to them, their worst display, without a shadow, well, that was a bad one, but they should have been beaten by Waterford, which is amazing, like. But having said that, against Cork, they were fierce and lucky to lose there in the last few minutes. I mean, that was a brilliant performance from Cork.
And had beaten Armagh, so we're kind of saying, okay, we're clutching maybe in a few straws here, but you would sense that if Galway Mayo meets the kind of championship next summer, there mightn't be the gap that there was this year.
No question about it. And no, they'll not be. And I mean, Galway won 2 All-Irelands on the Champions in the last 3 years or something. Or, is that right? Yeah. So, I mean, look, it's like Cork and Holland, they can come fairly overnight as well. And Mayo and Galway. I mean, in the previous games, I think 6 games, so we've only a point between them in the championships, which more like it.
You don't know what about Mr. Ring. He says, you know you're fucked when Tipper sat it for you.
Great stuff, yeah.
Every time, like, what a put down, what a way to finish it up. Will we go with the second part of that interview?
Yeah, let's have a look at Michael Commons again.
Yeah, okay, and then we'll be on to Josie. We're looking at Michael Commons too here. Okay, up we go.
Because all Tom had to do was to open his mouth, and the crowd were with him. He could be insulting you from a height or giving out to you from a height, and yet you just doubled over because he was telling it as it was a lot of the time. You had to appreciate that too, that behind all of the hits you took, there was a lot of truth.
And that was one of the things, if I remember that night, it's where there was, such excitement in Mayo, and again, such a huge build-up and plans being made for Sam and the homecoming. And his message was very straightforward. Win it first, and then plan the celebration.
Oh, that was exactly it. And like, he could hit the nail on the head, as they say. He just had that ability. But the people respect him for that. And he wiped the floor with nearly all of the people on the stage that night. It was Lally they were all talking about after the show. Every one of them. And they wanted to hear more of him that night, So that's a great power to have.
You mentioned his popularity in so many different places. Of course, Tom's lineage spreads between the 3 counties as well. And, he had great grow for Mayo, Roscommon, not just Galway.
Well, he had, you see, he was, you have to say, first and foremost, he was a Galway supporter. And he was very proud of that. But like his great-grandfather actually was from the parish of Claremorris, Redmond, and his father was born down in Mount Delvin, in the Roscommon side there. And he had numerous friends in Claremorris, like he loved going into the Gilligan's pub and O'Brien's pub for the quizzes and all of that. So like through that and the bacon factory and all the connections that were in there, when you live in an area this close to the 3 counties meet, people in all these areas have caused relations, intermarriage between the 3 counties. It's huge. And the banter obviously is intense at times. The McGreen and Bridge would be a witness to it, But like Tom, sure you could go on and on about him. I often say that if you were up in the sorting office in Dublin and there was 1 million letters in there, Tom was so I can guarantee you, if you'd ever got a letter from Tom, you would have you know that too. I mean, and the amount of times he would send local notes to me, and they had to be fairly precise, but how he could bring in the connections between Garafrons or Dunmore and wherever round here, and if there was somebody who played for the Wicklow or whatever team, or a rugby team or a soccer team, his knowledge was encyclopedic. He was just an amazing person, totally and absolutely.
An enormous loss, as you said at the very outset, and yet, you know, his legacy will live on. And as we look around this pub, Michael, and the great images and the great teams and all of the great sporting highlights that tell their own story in here, and I suppose you'd hope at some point in the not too distant future that we'll have Lally's Bar open in whatever form that may be.
Well, I would hope so. And mention of the bar, actually, I remember the week or two after Tom died there, and his good friend Pat McWalter wrote a beautiful tribute to him in the Tuam Herald, and I actually laughed through so much of that tribute in a way, you know, because it captured Tom perfectly, and especially the one about in business, where the old saying is that the customers are always right, and as Pat correctly pointed out in Tom Lally's case, that was never the case. The customer was nearly always wrong if it came down to it. And Tom could get away with that, because that's why people came in many of the time, just to be told off or whatever by him, you know. And they were back in again. You had to get the telling off from Tom. No, we can never forget Tom Lally. He was very, very special. Anytime, I haven't passed through it that much, you know, because in the last year and all of that. But I have to say, you know, it is a fabulous place here, and Mike Quinn was very, very good to Tom as well, and did a great job on the bar, and was a huge help to him. And I think we would all hope in this area, and all the friends, that this will be kept going when the time is right again.
Michael Commons, as ever, a big, big thanks for joining us on this night where we pay tribute to the great Tom Lally. And where else should we do it? But here in Lally's.
Yeah, thanks to Michael Commons there. Great lad. And I'm sure you all enjoyed that interview as well. Right, let's bring in the man that's been referenced a couple of times already as being responsible, along with his son, for one of the great nights in Garafrons, as we head to Gort and say a very good evening to Josie Hart. Looking well, Josie. How's things?
Good evening, lads.
How are you, Josie? How are things?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah.
Told you I lost 2 stones since I was down there last. And feel a lot better.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that night anyways, because it was one of the best that I've ever experienced. And Aidan keeps talking about it too. You know, it was...
Yeah, while you're I'd play a little of the clip there, Ollie, of the night in when you arrived in Garafrons, just to refresh people's memory. Aidan and Josie came down that evening, and what an evening we had. And this is...
Aidan, one more time. I know you've done it a million times. You better lift that above your head for the people of Garafrons and the more. In fairness to the lads, they're from Gort, as you know. Josie has a pub. He was working up until the last minute. He wanted to make the last few bob he could before he handed over the reins. And now he's ready to hit for Garafrons. I suppose, Josie, before I talk to Aidan, when I say Garafrons, what's the first thing you think of?
I think I've been working in an Upper East Side bar in the late 60s, and jazzy place enough from Monday to Friday. But on the weekends, 3 Ronan started to come in, and the boss said to me, "How come you're getting rid of so much bottled Budweiser?" I said, "There's lads, are the lads coming down from the Bronx?" "No," I said, "there's 3 Garafrons lads coming in." "Where's that?" he said. I said, "It's in Ireland." That was my own introduction with Garafrons.
You're also very familiar with a certain publican who calls you now and again with a certain librarian.
Oh yeah, famous man, all right. I got to see this guy and see how he operates.
This is how it works. Tom Lally is the template for how pubs should be ran. I mean, we can't imagine what it's like. TL will be here. Is TL here yet, is he? He'll be here in a few minutes anyway. He's busy trying to get the new stove going.
And you see, that was the thing that Tom and Brian used to call fairly regularly up to you, Josie, in Gort. Tom would hop in the library when Brian would be on and in working duty, and he just wanted to spin and go up there and talk hurling and maybe a bit of shinty.
Oh, yeah. And on one of the last trips, he actually bought a drink for the whole bar. And I think some of the lads were amazed of the library crowd anyways. But he did. Sure, it's sad really, his first anniversary. It was great to hear Pat McWalter there and his wife Monica, or Pat talking anyways. And I remember the couple very well. And Michael Commons, I've heard of him before, and I thought that was very enjoyable to hear his answer about Mayo patronising us. It was very good. There's things about it that you'll never forget, about him. And I read the tribute in the Trum Herald, and I did laugh through it as well. But I wouldn't have known Tom now as well as you'd have known him. But Tom, to me, sure was kind of Gara France, and Gara France might be small, but they're a very proud community. I'd never forget that night because things were genuine there, you see big crowds at places, but would they be that genuine? Everyone that was there that night was genuine. I remember coming out from Dunmore with you, Wally, after being with John Keenan, which was a great experience, enough for me too, because I had known him in the years gone by, and driving up to the village, and I could see into the three pubs and they were quite empty. There was nobody in them actually. And until we came to the community centre, I got it open my eyes. Like, I would hope that, if the Sam Maguire came up this way, we'd be able to reciprocate. But the knowledge of hurling and the interest in hurling in Gara France surprised me. And I'll never forget walking down John Street in Kilkenny, and I see this bunch coming up against me. I think right in front of Langton's actually, and a league game in February. Oh my God, it opened my eyes too, about your interest down there. And I'll never forget the night that we pulled in, that same night we pulled in Jordan's on the way out. I believe that old woman is dead since, the Lord have mercy on her. And should the people gather there, it'd make you cry really,
Yeah, it was very emotional that whole
it
night.
was very emotional. Yeah, very emotional. The night,
Of course, the one thing you would have learned probably, Josie, is that Tom would have had nearly all of the major sporting trophies that Galway won. We even had that. Do you remember the under-21 hurling championship? This monstrosity, and that Cross Cashel trophy arrived in a couple of times, and
oh yeah,
it did. I don't think it impressed anybody, that trophy, and I'd say it was probably much the same if it came into your bar. But the Liam McCarthy was an obvious omission.
Yeah, after 29 years, and it was quite a long time too, and it was about time to do something about it, but they did, and hopefully, again, very shortly. No excuse for being 29 years out either, But, sure, that's it. The library crowd, I used to love to see them coming because Tom would usually be with them, And the bit of music that night was very good from Brian. Very good. Played a few Joe Cooley's tunes, especially The Wise Maid, and the song "The Rooster" from John Knightley. I'll never forget that one. There's a lot of things about the night I'll never forget,
Yeah. Well, just while you mentioned the Rooster, just to give you a little breather, I'll give you a small little blast of the Rooster. I have it here, and it'll probably run you from the show, or it'll just entitle a load of people into it at this stage. But this is one of the great performances. Now, we won't play it to the full, but we'll play a bit of it just to whet your appetite with.
We had some chickens. No, some chicken. No eggs would they lay. My wife says, this sure is funny. We're losing money. No eggs would they lay. But then the rooster came into our yard and got our chicken right off of their yard. Living eggs now, what they never used to.
I'll just move him a bit forward towards the end of it there, because it goes on a long one. The encounter at the end.
Losing money. But then this chicken came into our yard and got our rooster right off of his guard. This good chicken, I can never kick it. I can kick it. Ever since that rooster into our yard.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Where would you get stuff like that except in Rhode Island?
Yeah, well, it reminds me, I don't know, Billy Connolly used to do a thing about, you know, when a load of people get singing together and half of them know the song and the other don't know it, and they're all singing different parts of it at the one time. I think the rooster, as it was never sung that night, because I think everybody was singing a different line, like when John was singing it, and John mixed it up. But it was a great night. I remember your reaction that night now, and you were sitting right beside me, and I don't think you'd ever seen a performance like that before, Josie, anywhere.
Never. And I was at a couple of good ones in my younger days in New York, about 50 years ago. And
I see this. From Andrew Kearney.
I wouldn't spot that one for anyone.
Andrew has a comment up here. The Rooster by John Knightley. JK is amazing. We'll put up the full version after the show, but it went on to 6 minutes, and we wouldn't be able to show the 6 minutes on the stream here that we have at the moment. But well done to John Knightley. He made a part of the night that night, and Tom's contribution at the end, he referred to a wicked chicken. When we had Pat on there, Pat told us before about nicknames. I think, what was he saying, Ollie? Was it 220 nicknames that?
I think he was up. They were up to 220 the last count as they started writing down Tom's nicknames, many of which, of course, were in Irish. Because Tom was pretty good at the Gaeilge from, I think it was the year that he spent in Coláiste in Galway as a student. So he was well able to throw in the Cúpla Focal. He was also a big fan, obviously, of going to matches. And I think that's, Josie, the one thing we're all crying out for here now that might just take us away from sitting at home and twiddling our thumbs is getting out to matches. What's Aidan's mood like, and the Galway lads and the inter-county players who must be so frustrated right now with the way things are?
They are, but they're definitely looking forward. And few regrets, I'd say, from last year. It was a small window for them, and Shane O'Neill wouldn't have had a good look at them either. He only had to come in. He couldn't come in before the 14th of September, and the county final dragged a bit. And it was hard going enough. The loss of Cathal Mannion in the 21st minute through that hamstring, and the loss of Joe in the last 10 minutes, definitely for any hurling follower, had to be, it had to be a big point in Galway losing. I'd say they're very determined inwardly from themselves without any prompting at all of doing better this year. I notice, they're doing extra things in the morning that I wouldn't want to be talking too much about, but they're doing lots of things. They're doing lots of things to make themselves better, and without being pushed at all. And I feel that there's a good feeling about it. And so we're up there. We're up there with any of them anyways, haven't we?
Of course, yeah. So it's watch out Limerick. Is that what you're saying? Watch out Limerick.
We'll have to go to war with them at some stage anyways.
Oh, yeah,
That's the big thing.
Yeah. And when Tom used... Sorry, yeah. Go on,
no, you're okay, Brian. I was just going to make a reference, obviously, because whatever about the frustration of an inter-county footballer, the frustration of a publican must be tenfold because your doors are closed for over a year now. What's the thinking? Are you getting any feel that maybe you'll get a shot at this by the end of the summer?
Yeah, sure. You'd be hopeful, really, like that you would, There's a good article on some of the papers today, written by Thomas O'Shea, and it's quite a good article about the mental health side of things and people getting out and about and mixing and talking and chatting, and the stats too. Might be hard to. I think we will. We have to be optimistic, anyways. And just to tell you a funny one about when I was in the bar in New York. Some of the customers they were Americans really, downtown, and they'd come back to Ireland for vacation, and you'd ask them what they thought of the country, and the usual, sights were great and all that. And I said to one guy one night, "What do you think of the pubs?" I don't know, Joe, he said. "When they're closed, they seem to be open, and when they're open, they seem to be closed." All I can say is to that one, go figure.
Josie, many thanks for joining us tonight. You've been a great friend of Tom's, especially in more recent years.
Josie, thanks very much, Josie. We'll see you soon again down in Hart's Pub in Gort. Only this time, I won't be passing through as an employee of Galway County Libraries. I'm a free man now, I'm a free agent. He'll
be in spending a bit of that pension, Josie.
More often, so.
That's it. All right, Josie, thanks for everything. Thanks for coming on. And
thanks for having me on. Because
regards to Carden as well. Carden is your technical support there in the background, I'm sure.
Oh, and I need technical support,
Yeah.
But you know Tom, much better than I do. It was great to hear his brother talking. I don't think I met his brother, but it was great to hear him talk.
Yeah, we have a clip from Paddy coming up towards the end when we're finishing off later on. I think, Ollie, we could nearly bring Pat back in again if we want to talk briefly about the nicknames, and then we'll have Dave and Angela and the poem. Will I do your poem now, and then we get Pat and then?
Yeah, so let's go back 12 months, because when we had our first, I suppose, online Facebook Live chat in the immediate aftermath of Josie's passing, emotions were raw after Tom Lally's passing. There's a Freudian slip. And we had a great bit of music and we had a great bit of banter. And Josie came on chatting this time last year as well. And it was hard to get our heads around it. And I suppose one of the contributions, apart from the music and the stories from Josie and Pat and John Dooley and all the guys who came on last year, was this little poem that I penned to remember TL. Let's have a listen back to this time last year. I just said to Brian, but we'll have to do a TL song. After poor old Michael Layton passed away, we did a Mal song, so we'll do a TL song. But it's not quite that simple in the current climate to get musicians together. But however, this might be a start as regards the words anyway. So here's a few thoughts, a couple of stanzas that I put together this evening called TL.
There's a place you might know 4 miles from Dunmore where a legendary pub has its site. And the punters would come, not just for a drink, but to meet someone most erudite. His knowledge was vast, and his subjects were many, from politics right through to sport. And his word, it was final, of that there's no doubt, when the legend Tom Lally held court. He'd a nickname for most folk, but no hurt was meant. In fact, it was part of his charm. So when Steady or Talty or My Ball came in, the roll call would cause no alarm. If you didn't drink Guinness in Tom Lally's bar, you had often to take what you got. Some nights he had Miller, some nights he had Bud. Lady Luck would decide cold or hot. Tom suffered no fools with his rapier wit. but perhaps that was part of the game. An actor on stage, when it came to perform, no two nights were ever the same. Some nights they were famous and history made, as we welcomed home Liam and Sam. In over 5 decades, Tom made many friends, be they Scan, be they Shaft, be they Sham. And so memories now are all that we have, now that TL has moved on upstairs. I'm sure that right now he and Mal are ensconced in discussing old Jarlath's affairs. To his Lieutenant Mick and to Pat and JD, and to his army of Garafron's friends, be glad that we knew him, but let's all ensure that's not where this story ends.
Very good, Ali. Very good.
Yeah, that was nice. Just to clarify, Brian, erudite means somebody with great knowledge. And another man who's very much erudite is Pat McWalter. Let's bring Pat back in, and Monica, if they were tuned in. And you mentioned about the nicknames. I mean, most we probably won't refer to, Pat, on this broadcast for legal reasons, but at last count, as Brian mentioned, you were into the 200s as regards nicknames. Some more palatable than others, but he was extraordinary at having labels, and it could be anything from small ball and having nicknames that could be after some other famous sporting person. You could be a Georgie Best, or you could be somebody else, but there were many and they were varied. And you did say to me that quite a few in Irish as well.
Oh, sorry, Pat. Yeah.
Hi, Brian.
Sorry, Pat. Yeah, just repeat there what you said there. You were muted there for a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Tom, while he wasn't always politically correct, but yet he never wanted to be. He used a lot of alternative names.
Pat, just come a bit closer to the
Yeah. So Tom, he used a lot of alternative names, and certainly the local people and his usual punters, they understood who Tom was talking about. And as Ali said, a lot of them, some of them were complimentary, especially if you were Purcell or Talty or Lineker and My Ball and whatever. Some of them would be less complimentary, whether you're a mouse catcher or a fly catcher or whatever. Sometimes people come into the shop and they might have questioned maybe some of his produce or whatever. Some unfortunate guy came in one day and he questioned about the tomatoes, whether they were soft or hard. So he was forever known as soft tomatoes. So another time, Tom, he was looking for a ticket. He found it very difficult to get a ticket in Dublin for some match or whatever, and he heard that this guy, local fellow, that hardly ever went to a match, got a ticket. In fact, he had a spare one, and he was selling it. So he was forever known as George the Greek.
George the Greek, yeah.
The Greek. But yeah, Tom had a lot of names, and he used to. As we said, Tom spent a year in Closheen and Galway, and he was fluent in Irish, had great knowledge of Irish, and he used that to great effect. So we all know who on Far Fada Mock was, on Fari Conchka Tapi. He had Pádraig O'Sula on. He had, there was
Farna Hampshire as well, wasn't there? Farna Hampshire.
Well, Farna Hampshire, yeah. And he had a little bit of Spanish as well. There was an El Loco and an El Tigre. Then he had, some people.
Yeah.
Then he had an Eva Peron and Movita.
And the one, Pat, about the guy that used to come in on the Friday night, the Saturday night, and the Sunday night for the few pints. Well, I've forgotten what it was again. What was it? It was 10 or 10, 10, 6. Or
something. Yeah. Well, yeah. I think it was 6, 10, 6. He was known as. He'd have 6 pints on a Friday night, 10 on a Saturday night, and he'd not go as heavy on a Sunday night. He'd have 6 on a Sunday night.
So 6, 10, 6. Yeah.
He was known as 10, 6.
And would everybody know in the pub when they'd be sitting around having an old chair, if you walked in or if I walked in, and Tom made a reference, like he wouldn't say hello to me and Brian, but he'd have a name and people would know it anyway. Sure,
yeah. Well, there was this man, this guy, he used to come down every Saturday night, and he used to be selling lottery tickets for Milltown.
Yeah.
So Tom, of course, reluctantly, because he was buying a few pints, he let him sell the tickets, but he was known as Lucky Cody.
Lucky Cody.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then his friend would come in and well, we better not name any names, but we'd say Michael. And Michael had very little interest in sport or whatever, but he would always listen to Midwest radio, or he would listen to some commentary. So when he would come down to the few pints, he would say the opposite. So so the argument would start then, of course. So that was Tom Parlin. He was chairman, or Tom Parlin.
Yeah. Because I know, like, I found out there a good while ago now, it's maybe 10 years ago, when myself and Mick Tully were managing an under-14 soccer team in Dunmore. At the time, Trapattoni was the Irish manager and Tardelli was his sidekick, at the time.
Yeah.
So I was known as Trapattoni behind my back, and Mick Tully was called Tardelli. So it was Trap and Tardelli, So that's well, it wasn't such a bad name to be called. I'm sure he probably had another name for me as well, but it was never repeated to me anyway. But
he had no great time for politicians, really. And there was one former Taoiseach, and he used to call him the rat in the anorak.
Yeah, Bertie.
And then, of course, we had another soccer commentator or whatever, the sunburned monkey. So
Eamon Dunphy. That was Eamon Dunphy. Yeah,
that was Eamon Dunphy.
Yeah.
But he, he was very observant of people, and sometimes he was cruel as well. This other lovely man used to come in, and before he'd order his pint, he'd have a cough, and Tom used to call him Vincent Van Cough. So,
very good. And he had a name for Paul Connaughton as well, hadn't he? The Crew.
The Crew. Yeah, that was right. Yeah.
Jesus, like he was.
But somebody mentioned just before we leave about the programs. He had a wonderful collection of programs, and he sorted them and resorted them and whatever, catalogued them. But thankfully, a great friend of his, Tony Jordan, is as we call him, the curator of the programs at the moment. Tony has, taken them aside and is taking care of them at the moment, and they find it, as they say, a good home. But the Jordan family were very good to Tom down through the years, all of them, in fact. But I know Tony especially. Tony used to ring Tom every week and chat, and so they were very good to him.
Yeah. So you have Monica there beside you. If you're looking at this T-shirt I have on me at the moment, this refers to the Fleadh, the County Fleadh in 2000 in Dunmore. And I was talking to Pat earlier on, and he said, he says you have that T-shirt as long as the Tom has, the Galway striped T-shirt he had, and he had it on every occasion. I don't know why it lasted him so long. But I know now, like, why the Fruit of the Loom went out of business, because this thing has lasted since 2000. It's 21 years old, and you have the logo up here for Fleadh Ceoil na Gaillimh on it. But I suppose on the Saturday night of the Fleadh Ceoil, we were in Tom Lally's, and luckily for me, there was a guy, a piper, and he was staying with Tommy Keaveney, and I brought him out to Lally's across the mountain over to Tommy Keaveney's. And when I came back, Jesus, everybody was gone from the pub. I closed down. I said, what happened here? Because at that time, I was designated myself as a driver, and I was looking forward to a few pints. Everybody was gone. But Monica, you'll have to tell us what happened in my absence that night,
Well, no wonder everybody was gone, Brian, because it was 10 to 4 in the morning.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Shamefully, it was. Yes, it was. It was on in Dunmore as well, the music, and we came out from Dunmore at around 1 o'clock, and I went into Lally's to the right session, and it was a great session with the Westport lads. But we were just singing and chatting for the night, and next thing we saw at the door was a yellow jacket. So the Garda Síochána came, and they kind of wanted us to go home. So we politely left. But the lads then weren't able to drive home, some of the Westport lads. So they came, we put them up. I put some up in our house over here, and they were down in Manhires as well. So we did B&B that night out of Lally's, but I had got a summons out of it as well. It was the only I was
Found on.
found on one of the found on, but it was a great night. And
Yeah. And did you have to go to court and all that?
no, I didn't have to go to court. I think there was a few that went to court. I didn't go.
Yeah. Because there was one guy, a musician there on the night. He was from Belfast, and he played the flute. Like, I can't think of his name, but he went to the court. I think it was either in Tuam or Dunmore, and he pleaded with the judge or the justice that he was a cultural ambassador for the Irish music, and he said that he was very disappointed with the fact that there was a flagpole on, and it was a cultural event, and that Gareth Franz was part of the parish, and that he felt that he was very aggrieved to be getting a summons like for playing Irish culture in your own country, and to be summoned for playing in the spirit that was in it. And fair play, the judge said, you know what, he said, I like your argument there, he said, and your reasoning, and he struck it out. But everybody else got fined, like include you got a fine. Charlie, my brother, got fined as well.
I did. I have a famous bit of paper.
How much was it then? How much did it cost?
£25. £25.
Jeez,
£25. Yeah.
There you go.
But it was and Tom often upcasted to me, and not in fun.
You didn't offer to pay.
Not at all. Yeah. Well, look at Oh, that's grand. Now, thanks. Because I want to give Dave and Angela in the background. See, Angela is taking a big gulp of something there at the moment, so I don't know what it is, but we'll have a little chat with them.
It's one of Tom's sandwiches that he used to always enjoy at the end of the night, no matter what sessions we had. He always enjoyed the food at the end of the night that the good ladies that have brought over.
Oh, sure, the ladies were very good, yeah.
He always loved the sandwiches.
Well, sure. Look, we can bring in we can bring in Dave. We while we're all together here, we might. No, you stay on.
Well, Dave, I'm glad it's a Man United top you've on and not an Ireland one after the debacle of tonight. Ireland are after being beaten 1-0 by Luxembourg.
Yeah, I've seen that. I was looking on the text.
Yeah.
Now, can you imagine how many fingers Tom Lally would have bitten to the nail at this stage with Ireland losing to Luxembourg? Mother of God, you can only imagine the reaction over there.
I'll bring on Josie because he's there in the background. No, we're all together on this one, so you can join in there, Josie. Now, Dave and Angela, in the latter years there, you were very good to Tom. Dave gone in doing lottos and collecting lottos, and Angela, you were looking after Tom in the sense like that. Tom was a man that liked his food, as Monica mentioned there a few minutes ago. So you used to occasionally supply a regular dinner to him, and Tom loved his dinner, and he loved your dinners.
Oh yeah, he did. I know Tom 20. I knew him 27 years, I'd say. So when the first time I went into the pub, he was just so friendly to myself and to Dave. But I remember I went in and he said, "Where are you from?" And I says, "I'm from Donegal." And he says, "All right." And he started saying, "Well, I was in Bundoran in such a date and such a year and blah blah blah." And then I said, "Well, I'm not really from Donegal." I said, "My parents are from. My mum's from Derry and my dad's from Antrim." And he said, where are they from? And I said, "You won't know where my mother's from." He said, "Well, try me." And I said, "Right, she's from Swatra." He said, "Well, I was in Swatra in such a year."
Yeah, he was.
And I said, "You couldn't. It's only a small place, but you couldn't believe he has been all over this country."
Angela, are you wearing a Donegal top when you're there?
I am. Yes.
Stand up there. Stand up, and we'll have it. We want to see it. We want to see that top.
Be proud.
There you go. Yeah. But no, look at there's just only one other thing that we need to do. Will we play a bit of music before we go to Paddy? And then,
I know Seamus Mahan, who's been very good to us, and Seamus really, no more than yourself, Brian, with the technical side of it, but musically, Seamus is responsible for the concert that went out at 8 o'clock and helped with the creation of tonight. I know we've got other pieces of music that we just didn't have time to get in tonight, including a couple of lovely tracks from Mary Flaherty, which you'll be able to see on this platform. I know Mary and Eric are tuned in Dublin. How are you doing, folks? And thanks a million for tuning in. And I know Eric, many's the day that he'd have cycled out to meet Tom Lally as well from Dromore anytime he was down with Mary and the kids from Dublin. So you'll be able to watch Mary and hear her tribute songs and the pieces that she did for Tom as well on this page over the next couple of days. But here's Seamus with a special song again that he performed for us last year in the immediate and sad aftermath of Tom's passing.
When daylight turns to starlight and the seasons turn to change, I get the same old answer, but the question still remains. You shared a brief but magic song, and by the first leaves of autumn, you were gone. Not until the rain touched my face, not until the first leaf fell from place, not until that moment did I see, never realize what you meant to me. From the days you filled with sunlight to the laughter in your eyes, from the making of the breaking till the day you said goodbye, the very words cut to the bone, and by the first leaves of autumn you were gone. Not until the heart's defense is down, not until some old come-all-year comes round, not until that moment did I see, never realized what you meant to me. Not until the rain touched my face, not until the first leaf fell from place, not until that moment did I see, never realized what you meant to me, never realized what you meant to me.
Just pure class, isn't it? Thanks, Seamus.
Lovely stuff from Seamus.
You'd listen to that all night long, wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Yeah.
I know Pat and Monica are still there, Brian, as well, if you want to bring them back in, because we're going to wrap up with a few words from Paddy Lally just to sign off on this as well. But I know, obviously, two people tuned in tonight as well are your near neighbours right beside you, John Dooley and Cora as well, Pat, who were very good to Tom. And of course, the More Than Year House, they called down. I'm sure you see them passing down to chlorine to the Dooleys as well. So I'm sure John and Cora are tuned in tonight and are feeling those pangs of loneliness that you have been feeling, Pat, as well, for Tom not being around. But a lot of people, no more than John and Cora, have been very good to Tom locally as well. So we're very much thinking of all you guys as well on a night like this.
Just a comment here coming in, Ollie, at the moment. Tony Mills, can you read that from there?
I can. It says, Lord of mercy on Tom, a great character, and I heard some great stories about him. Thanks, Tony. You and many more, that's for sure. Yeah, that's the thing. The stories of Tom are legendary, and they're gone far and wide. Yeah. And you mentioned already the trips to Scotland, but the trips up north as well. I mean, he was in Derry recently enough as well, Pat, wasn't he, a couple of years ago for a famous escapade?
Yeah, well, yeah, you mentioned about John there. John was very good to him, of course, and John called in most days and the chat, and he'd bring him to Claremorris, and Tom would tell him, I'll be home with you now, but next thing Tom would have disappeared and he wouldn't be home with him. I think one day John brought Tom to Claremorris, but Tom decided he saw the Derry bus there, so he hopped on the bus to Derry. And but when Tom got to Derry, he didn't realise it was the last bus. There was no bus back, and he hadn't brought a lot of money with him, but he had to stay the night in Derry. And of course, it didn't go down too well. I think he kind of blamed John in the end because of
yes.
But,
well, there's a story about Tom, and this will just show you. I mean, it's one that a couple of years ago, the stage himself and was Ray Charles and a few of the guys went and stayed for Christmas in down in the McWilliam Hotel and had the Christmas dinner. Went back. Tom went back at the night, probably after a few drinks. Everybody was going back to bed, but Tom ended up anyway. With the key there, the card that you open the door. And he got the door open in. And this is crazy, went inside, but he flicked the light, but the light didn't come on because he didn't put the card in. So he went off to bed thinking that there was a power failure on the night. And he went off to bed and got up in the morning and he told the boys at breakfast, Jesus, he said, that was awful last night. There was this hotel, he said, after all we paid, there was no power in it. He just didn't put the card into the slot. So there you go. So that was
his last Christmas. That was his last Christmas going away anywhere. So after that, he stayed local and he came around to us all, and he came to up to John and Cora and to here, and he loved that, and over to May Dooley and Nolan Chris Healy, and of course into Kathleen. He's a good neighbour next door.
Yeah.
So he loved.
I was talking to Paddy earlier on today. Now he wants to come on, and of all places, Paddy is living in, as Tom would say, in Fox Rocky in Dublin. But it seems that they don't have the quality of internet or broadband that we have down here in the sticks. But Paddy, I think the best option was for Paddy to, and fair play to him and Mary, his partner. She videoed him, and he did a nice little tribute, and I think that's probably how we finish up tonight, Ollie, is it? With
sure, let's hear from Paddy.
What we do is at the end of it, I'll bring everybody back up and we'll say good night, and that will be the end of the show for tonight. Thanks to everybody for it. But this is the little video that Paddy sent a while ago, and it's a nice way to finish the night.
Everybody, I want to thank you on this anniversary of Tom's death. Thank you for everybody, for all his friends and customers, people who knew him. We really appreciated last year the wonderful turnout at his funeral, all the people along the road there with the Galway flags. It was a wonderful experience, and Tom would very much have appreciated it. As I said, with Tom, would only ring me when he needed a tax form filled in or a pub license form filled in. I'd ring him once a fortnight and we'd chat about various things, and he'd tell me who was dying and who was ill. And I used to say to him, Tom, have you any good news? Can you tell me anybody get married or anybody have children? What would I want to tell you that for? He'd say to me. And then I'd talk about Galway, a good win, and so the team that were playing weren't up to much. He'd usually say, I thought by the time I'd finished the phone call, I'd be more depressed than Tom. But I can see why people like him. He had a wicked, sharp humour and a quick answer, and he was my brother, and I loved him. And anyway, thank you all for your everything again. I can't say how much Mary and myself really appreciated your support the last year, all the videos and all the various things. I've really appreciated it, and I came to realise how much Tom meant to you all. And anyway, we'll have a drink to his memory, and again, thank you all.
Yeah, that was nice. Thanks to Paddy for sending us that message, and that was a right tempting looking pint of Smithwick's that he had in front of him. So I think with that, let's all go and have a well-earned drink and a toast to Luxembourg and to Tom Lally on this night of nights. Thank you, Brian, for pulling it all together, and for everybody else. And I'm sure there'll be many more nights like this in the years to come. Good night, folks, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.